Welcome once again to the Deep Dive.
It's good to be here.
Today we are undertaking a deep dive into the very fabric of human civilization in the 25th century, and it's a fabric that's being torn apart by total galaxy-spanning warfare.
That's right. And we're not just looking at history books here. The material we've got puts us right in the cockpit. We're strapping into a grav fighter and accelerating toward the relativistic edge.
We are 37 light years from Sol aboard the largest mobile construct ever conceived by humankind, the star carrier America.
And it is an unparalleled look at this intersection of, extreme technology, existential terror, and, political decay.
Yeah. The source material gives us this incredibly stark snapshot of humanity, organized under the Terran Confederation, and locked in what seems like a completely unwinnable war.
An unwinnable war against the colossal ancient Sh'daar Galactic Empire and their proxies, the Turusch, who are just relentless and remorseless.
So this deep dive, it really centers on a crucial flashpoint. We're tracking a carrier battle group's desperate arrival and the deployment of the elite VFA-44 Dragonfires.
The Starhawks?
The Starhawks, colloquially. Their mission is to reinforce General Gorman's beleaguered Marine Expeditionary Force, the MEF, who are pinned down on this truly lethal planet, Eta Boötis IV, or Harris, as the locals call it.
And our mission today is pretty complex. We have to analyze the physics that allows humanity to wage war at nearly the speed of light.
Which is just mind-bending.
It is. Then we have to dissect the bizarre and profoundly toxic biology of Harris, confront the deep political and sociological fissures tearing the Confederation apart back home.
And finally, try to synthesize the few chilling facts we've just gathered about our mysterious ancient alien enemies.
That's a lot to cover.
Okay, let's unpack this. I think we have to start with the scale, because the sheer magnitude of this war, even before we get into the physics, is almost beyond human comprehension.
It really is. I mean, the war didn't just start with a single flash. It was. It feels like it was the inevitable consequence of rapid, chaotic human expansion finally meeting an ancient, established galactic power.
We just kept pushing out.
Exactly. By the year 2367, the Terran Confederation had, pretty ambitiously, incorporated 214 interstellar colonies and maybe 1,000 smaller outposts.
And this rapid colonization, it was driven by the very technologies the sources suggest the enemy just despises.
Absolutely.
That sounds like humanity was just playing fast and loose with galactic real estate. We talk about Eta Boötis being 37 light years away, and I think that gives a false sense of distance.
It does.
The sources make it terrifyingly clear that the war isn't happening in some far-off, forgotten corner of the galaxy. The enemy is already approaching.
Right on our doorstep.
I mean, the fighting that occurred last year near Arcturus, that star is shining twice as bright as Venus in our sky. It was only 3 light years from Sol.
3 light years.
That's a proximity that should shatter any remaining public complacency.
You'd think so. But the sheer vastness of the enemy seems to have had almost the opposite effect. Humanity's first contact was with the Sh'daar, often called Canopians, who immediately stated they were merely servants.
Spittle management.
Pretty much. They served the true rulers, the Galactic Masters, the Sh'daar. The Turusch are just another technic alien species that the Sh'daar have deployed to act as their hammer in this specific theater. They are, as our sources state, relentless and remorseless, but they are also a strategic proxy.
So the knowledge that we're not even fighting the main power, that we are fighting an empire that has existed for 500 million years and spans the galaxy, that has created a psychological and sociological catastrophe back home.
Oh, absolutely. The sources describe widespread social depression and deep, paralyzing political division across the entire Confederation, this pervasive belief that victory is just. It's impossible.
And that internal corrosion of morale, it manifests immediately in the military structure through this overwhelming level of micromanagement.
Which is such a critical detail. The civilian government is panicking because the military seems unable to win, so they try to seize tighter and tighter control.
And this is why Confederation Central Command, or C3 on Earth, is dictating operational procedures down to the tactical level.
To people who are light years away and months behind in terms of information.
And crucially, C3 has installed Senate liaisons, like the officious Mr. Quintanilla aboard the America.
And these liaisons aren't advisory, are they?
Not at all. Their primary function is to act as political observers to ensure that Earth's orders, which are often months out of date, are strictly followed.
And that just sets up this immediate and profound command friction we witness between Rear Admiral Koenig, who's the battle-hardened commander of the battle group, and Quintanilla.
Koenig's orders were strategically contradictory from the start.
Yeah.
Maximize speed to reach the Marines, but at the same time, keep the battle group intact.
An impossible task. Quintanilla pushes him mercilessly on speed, right? He sees every second as a political opportunity to prove the Navy is doing its job.
And Koenig makes a career-defining decision. His gut, his instinct, tells him that following Quintanilla's push for hyperacceleration would inevitably force him to split his fleet.
And they'd be picked off in detail.
Exactly. So Koenig deliberately disobeys the Senate's implied priority of speed, arguing that holding the fleet together is the only way they can provide any meaningful support to General Gorman.
There's that great quote. He says he won't help Gorman by pissing away the ships of this battle group a few at a time.
It's just so blunt.
And this is more than just a disagreement. It's a perfect snapshot of the Confederation's strategic paralysis. The bureaucracy demands immediate results to quell panic, even if those results are strategically suicidal.
While the military command, the people actually on the ground, they understand that survival requires conservation of force and tactical discipline.
So Koenig risks his career, maybe a court-martial, because he's prioritizing the operational reality over bureaucratic compliance. He essentially views a whole fleet as more important than the instantaneous fate of the Marines.
And the vehicle for all this high-stakes political drama is, it's a character in itself, right? The star carrier America.
Oh, absolutely. The America is an incredible feat, designed specifically to project power across, dozens of light years.
And this titanic mushroom shape they describe, that's not just for looks.
Not at all. It's entirely functional. You've got this kilometer-long stem that houses the main habitats, the drives, and then there's just immense hemispherical cap at the front.
That cap is one of the most brilliant pieces of engineering in the whole thing. It's not just a dome.
No, it serves two vital simultaneous functions. First, it's the ship's primary reaction mass for conventional acceleration. But second, and critically, it's the radiation shielding.
Which you absolutely need when you're moving that fast.
You do. When traveling at significant fractions of light speed, the interstellar medium dust, gas, cosmic rays, it becomes devastatingly abrasive. That massive cap protects the entire hull behind it.
And then you've got the immense internal architecture, like the twin counter-rotating haberings.
Right, for artificial gravity. It's essential for keeping the crew sane and healthy during the low acceleration parts of the long journey. Without those, the crew would be in 0G for 18 hours straight.
Which would just compound the psychological stress of the mission.
For sure.
But let's talk about how this giant mushroom actually moves. The America uses the Alcubierre Drive. It's bending space-time to achieve faster-than-light travel.
Exactly, the warp bubble. But even with FTL, there are limitations. Due to the ship's colossal size and mass, you're moving millions of tons. Practical considerations severely limit the sustained acceleration to about 500 gravities.
Which sounds like a lot.
It is a lot, certainly, but it's the theoretical limit for a ship of that size.
And that's where we see the crucial difference in military capability, right? The Graphiters, the Starhawks, they use an entirely different system. It's a refinement of that FTL principle.
Yes, the quantum gravitic projectors.
So how do they work?
Well, these projectors don't try to move the entire mass of a capital ship. They focus an artificial curvature of space-time ahead of the small fighter. They create what is functionally a localized gravitational singularity that, it pulls the tiny craft forward.
So it's a pull mode.
It's the pull mode. And it allows the Starhawk to sustain accelerations up to a mind-boggling 50,000 gravities.
50,000, that's 100 times the stress the carrier can handle.
It completely redefines naval doctrine. The capital ships like the America are the slow strategic movers, taking that 18-hour journey seriously. The Starhawks are essentially relativistic bullets designed for lightning-fast deployment and strike missions.
And the America's interstellar travel mechanics really reflect that strategic slowness. To cover those 37 light years to Harris in 18 hours, they have to follow a very specific trajectory.
They do. They accelerate for just over 9 hours at 500 Gs, which pushes them up to about 54% of the speed of light, or 0.54 c. Then, at the halfway point, they flip the ship and reverse their drives to decelerate for the remaining 9 hours.
So the moment of arrival, what the pilots call zorching, that sounds like pure physics madness. The ship drops out of the Alcubierre bubble when they get to Harris, while it's technically traveling superluminally.
It is, at 1.08 c, or 108% the speed of light.
Wow.
And because space-time is being smoothed back out, the ship drops into normal space at a surprisingly modest residual velocity of just 1 kilometer per second, which is easily managed by conventional thrusters. But the exit is visually terrifying.
I can only imagine.
The sudden collapse of the warp field releases this intense ring of photons, a tortured photon flash that's visible across interstellar distances. It's a literal twist in the fabric of the sky announcing their arrival.
And that's just the challenge of getting there. If you really want to understand what the pilots face, you have to look at the relativistic combat they engage in. I mean, fighting at speeds where the rules of the universe they fundamentally change.
Right, and the Starhawk is designed not just for travel, but for instantaneous operational readiness. This isn't a slow launch.
Yeah.
They traverse the carrier's 200-meter cat launch tube, accelerating at 7 gravities. They go from 0 to 167 meters per second in less than 2.5 seconds.
And within seconds of leaving that tube, they're already receding from the America's shield cap at over 600 kilometers per hour.
And 600 kilometers an hour is just the starter pistol. The real sprint begins when they activate the gravitic boost.
The 50,000 Gs.
That sustained 50,000 gravities allows the Starhawk to reach nearly 99.7% of the speed of light, 0.997 c, in only 10 minutes.
10 minutes. You really have to stop and think about that achievement. In 10 subjective minutes, a pilot is covering over 1 billion kilometers.
Nearly 8 astronomical units. That's almost the distance from the Earth to Jupiter. The speed is necessary, but it comes at a profound psychological and physical cost.
And this is where my brain starts to melt a little bit. This extreme velocity introduces severe time dilation. For the pilot, Lieutenant Gray, the subjective passage of time is profoundly different from the objective time of the carrier, the planet, and, well, the rest of the universe.
Right. It's profound. To put it in perspective for you, Lieutenant Gray is experiencing time passing nearly 13 times slower than the outside world.
13 times. So for every minute he's in that cockpit.
Almost 13 minutes pass for everyone else. For Koenig, back on the America, if you want to get really precise with the physics.
You do.
At 0.997 c, time dilation shrinks the subjective time for the pilot down to just, what is it, about 7.7% of objective time.
That's just staggering. It's not just a physical isolation, it's a temporal one.
What?
You're basically in suspended animation, functionally living for only minutes while hours of the world's history are being written around you.
You are completely disconnected from the flow of time. And this disconnection is made physically manifest by the visual effects of near-sea velocity. The universe outside the cockpit is radically different.
The starbow.
The starbow. All the light from the stars is highly compressed into this blazing ring of light directly forward of the fighter.
And it's not the blackness of space we imagine. It's a terrifyingly beautiful spectrum. For centuries, physicists believed the starbow would just appear purely white, right?
They did. The reasoning was that as visible light, Doppler shifted out of the spectrum, invisible high-energy wavelengths like X-rays and gamma rays would shift into the visible spectrum, and it would all just cancel out into white light.
But the sources explain the reality is far more complex.
It is. The actual smearing of individual stellar light sources creates this visible, gentle color gradient. An intense blue to deep violet at the leading edge, where the highest energies are concentrated, and that fades to deep reds trailing behind. It's a stunning but completely alien view of the universe.
And unfortunately, that stunning view is strategically worthless.
Utterly. At near-sea velocity, forward sensors are virtually useless. All that visual data is just lost within that light-smeared ring ahead. The pilot has to rely entirely on predictive models and data beamed from the carrier.
Which is immediately going out of date.
Instantly. And compounding the blindness is the presence of the dust catcher. This is a high-gravity zone maintained ahead of the fighter, even during non-acceleration.
That's a safety measure, right?
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
At these speeds, even a few grains of sand hitting the hull would release enough energy to vaporize the fighter instantly. The dust catcher prevents collisions, but it also creates gravitational distortions that further interfere with any forward sensors.
So this leads directly to the core tactical problem, information lag. Gray's mission data, the location of the Turusch fleet, the status of the marine perimeter, it was updated just before he boosted.
But by the time he arrives, 17 hours of objective time have passed. That information is catastrophically out of date. The entire tactical situation around Eta Boötis the Firth might have collapsed hours ago, and he is flying completely blind into a potentially non-existent battlefield.
The isolation must be immense, physically and psychologically.
Oh, it is. Communication between ships at near sea is extremely difficult because of the severely Doppler distortions in the surrounding spacetime. They can't rely on constant radio chatter. This contributes to the intense loneliness the Zorkies experience.
And the sources mention that Gray, back on the carrier, was isolated by choice. He actively avoided his squadron mates because of his prim background.
But in the relativistic isolation of the cockpit, he missed them desperately. That constant hum of other human voices, the assurance that other people exist and are fighting with you, is stripped away. And that's a profound operational hazard.
Yet this terrifying speed is the only way humanity can match the Turusch fleet, and it's the source of their greatest tactical advantage.
The kinetic kill weaponry.
The ultimate application of EMC hands. A handful of sand becomes a tactical nuclear warhead.
Precisely. The Starhawks don't rely on explosive ordnance. They deploy these advanced missile ordnance, or AMSO missiles, packed with simple sand-sized lead BBs.
And when these minuscule grains are accelerated to nearly the speed of light, they possess enormous, almost unimaginable kinetic energy. They are pure force projectiles.
So the Starhawks use these missiles as overwhelming, high-velocity shotgun blasts against the shielding of the larger Turusch vessels. When the grains impact the enemy's shields, they cause intense ablative damage and, crucially, force a collapse of the shield integrity.
Which then allows follow-up conventional fire or simply overloads the enemy's energy systems.
Exactly. And we can't let the destructive power of this tactic just pass by. We have to revisit that terrifying historical analogy provided in the sources, the Martian desert impact.
Right. A comparatively heavy 12-kilogram projectile traveling at near sea struck the Martian desert 2,200 kilometers north of Ethiopia. This wasn't even a dedicated weapon.
And the resulting shockwave was planetary in scope?
It was monstrous. The source tells us that shockwave traveled through the Martian crust and snapped the buckyweave tether of the Ethiopian space elevator, the major orbital lift system 6,000 kilometers above the surface.
The fallout was just catastrophic. Millions of tons of orbital factories, shipyards, and habitats that relied on that tether were flung violently into deep space. The death toll was staggering.
And this was a single, non-explosive kinetic event. It demonstrates why the Turusch are so wary of the Starhawks and why their vast fleets were badly mangled by just 12 fighters in the first engagement.
The power of a relativistic pebble is, quite literally, planetary destruction on demand.
So after that successful but terrifying spoiling attack, Gray has to transition from fighting physics in space to surviving a hostile hellhole on the surface. We move now to the destination, Harris.
So Lieutenant Gray crash lands on Eta Boötis IV, or Harris, and the description of the environment makes it crystal clear this world is inimical to human life. It is a biological and physical nightmare.
The conditions are just overwhelming. The surface gravity alone is 1.85 G. That's nearly twice Earth's gravity.
Unbelievable.
Gray, even in his power armor, cannot walk far without the assistance of his spider unit. It's this specialized, meter-long, four-legged servo-assisted harness that conforms to his E-suit, helping him bear the weight of his own body and his gear.
And the atmosphere is crushing. The pressure is approximately 1,300 millimeters of mercury. That's nearly 1.7 times Earth's standard atmosphere. The temperature cycles dramatically, ranging from a hot 30 degrees Celsius to a blistering 60 degrees Celsius.
Survival requires constant active life support. There's no taking the helmet off.
No. And what Gray is breathing, or rather, what his suit is struggling to process, is a witch's brew of chemicals. The atmosphere is 30% carbon dioxide, 16% sulfur dioxide, and 14% sulfur trioxide.
Plus high levels of ammonia and carbonyl sulfide. And crucially, there is only a tiny fraction of free oxygen, just 3.85%.
So the suit is this marvel of nanotech, having to actively process oxygen from these incredibly poisonous sulfur compounds just to keep the pilot alive. The sources highlight that the sheer volume of waste products the suit has to vent just to maintain internal balance is enormous. It's a constant battle against the local chemistry.
The native life forms are, predictably strange, thriving in this toxic soup. They're carbon-based, using standard elements like carbon, nitrogen, hydrogen, and oxygen.
But they incorporate this heavy reliance on sulfur, S8, selenium, carbon disulfide, and cyanogen. Xenobiologists have a specific term for them, fluorana.
Fluorana, that implies characteristics of both the plant kingdom and the animal kingdom, but belonging to neither.
Exactly. You see sessile photolithoautotrophs, the plant analogs which survive in a reducing atmosphere, often symbiotic with mobile chemoorganoheterotrophs, the animal analogs, and chemosynthetic lithivores. This entire biosphere draws its carbon and energy directly from minerals and the poisonous atmosphere.
And this brings us to the immediate terrifying threat Gray encounters after his crash, the shadow swarmers.
which are visually unsettling. Dark gray, leaf-shaped about the size of a human hand, and they just flit and glide low to the ground.
Gray, understandably, initially fears there's some kind of bioweapon deployed by the Sh'daar.
But they're purely indigenous. And biologically, they are lithivores rock eaters. They get their carbon from mineral deposits or, as Gray discovers with absolute horror, from the high-performance carbon composite e-suit he is wearing.
So they're attracted to his technology, the rich, complex carbon nanoweave.
It's food to them. And their behavior is synchronized and highly efficient. When one swarmer finds an accessible carbon deposit, it communicates the find immediately via low-frequency sound waves that transmit easily through that dense atmosphere. And then they swarm, following the host.
The threat mechanism is horrifyingly specific to the material human technology relies on. They attach themselves with these tiny tube feet and possess ventral orifices equipped with grinding plates.
Described as being like organic diamond.
And then they deploy their digestive weapon, a squirt of concentrated sulfuric acid, which dissolves the carbon nanoweave, allowing the swarmers to ingest the material.
And the xenobiologists confirm they are all parts of a single, widely dispersed organism. Gray is essentially being consumed by a planet-sized intelligent moss that is specifically targeting his armor.
It just underscores that the war is fought on multiple fronts, military, physical, and chemical. But the complexity doesn't end with the environment. It's severely complicated by the human political friction trapped on the surface.
Yes, let's turn to the marine beachhead, the Mike Red Perimeter. It's a meager 5 kilometers by 2 kilometers, just this slender oval of relative safety protected by a massive 6 kilometer shimmering energy shield array.
And that shield is the only thing keeping the Marines and the colonists alive. The Turusch are constantly hammering it with particle beams and thermonuclear warheads.
So much so that the surrounding sand has been fused into black, steaming glass. The Marines can't even drop the shield for an instant to launch effective counter-battery fire. They are totally, completely pinned.
And trapped inside this perimeter are the Mufradeen colonists. These are a community defined by descent and religious conviction.
Right. They're the descendants of Muslims who, centuries ago, refused to sign the covenant of the dignity of humankind or accept the enforced political rewrite of their Holy Quran that was mandated by the Confederation government.
The name itself, Mufradeen, is Arabic for alone, referring to one who undertakes the pilgrimage, the Hajj, alone. This reflects their spiritual and political isolation. They view Earth, the Confederation, and its central government as Shaitan,
The enemy, the personification of evil and temptation.
and this profound ideological conflict comes to a head during the evacuation attempt. General Gorman has to evacuate his Marines, but he also has between 6,000 and 7,000 Mufrid refugees trapped inside. And the Turush are closing in, time is running out.
As the Navy transports begin accepting people, a riot breaks out.
It's fueled by the conviction of some community leaders that God wills them to stay and die on this remote world rather than return to Earth's oppression. They fear they'll be interned in camps until they comply with the covenant.
The local leader, Hamid, actually insists to Gorman that they would prefer to die by the alien's hand than go back to the camps and be forced to sign a document they view as sacrilege.
Which puts Gorman in an impossible military and ethical quandary.
He's forced to issue this terrible, brutal command decision to maintain order and save as many lives as possible. He orders his Marines to enforce the evacuation of women and children first.
Potentially at gunpoint, if the men rush the shuttles or try to sabotage the evacuation.
It's the ultimate irony of this conflict. They're being saved from genocidal aliens by the very military force they despise, which has to use physical coercion to make them leave a toxic world they feel religiously bound to defend.
This kind of deep internal political fracture is just as lethal to the Confederation's war effort as any Turush particle beam.
Absolutely. And this tragic human element brings us to the nature of the enemy who caused this siege in the first place, and what we now know about the overarching Sh'daar threat.
So the Harris engagement was critical not just for relief, but for intelligence. The captured Turush prisoners provided humanity with its first actual, detailed biological and sociological data on these proxies.
And they're an overwhelming case for the sheer diversity of life the galaxy holds. I mean, their physical description is profoundly alien.
They're described as slug-like, mottled black and dark brown, about 4 meters long, covered in this bare, mucus-wet skin protected by carapace sections. They just sound incredibly cumbersome.
They do, and they have these unique features. Half-meter black, whip-thin tentacles sprouting randomly, and a rounded, carapace-sheathed head.
The head is fascinating. It has recesses for at least 24 small black eyes arranged in 3 lines. And instead of a visible mouth, they use internal diaphragms for speech.
Bizarre. And their internal biology is a xenobiological nightmare. They rely on chemistries driven by both carbon and silicon, a combination humans have never seriously encountered in life forms, and they use complex sulfur chemistry.
And they're lithivores, like the shadow swarmers. They get sustenance from rocks and minerals.
What's even stranger is that they manufacture metabolic energy via a chlorophyll analog found in their skin pigmentation. They are mobile, aggressive, tool-using military entities, yet they photosynthesize like plants.
So they represent an entirely different evolutionary path.
One driven by high-energy, sulfur-rich environments. And this points to their probable homeworld. Xenobiologists believe they originate from a hot, Venus-like environment with the crushing CO2 atmosphere, strong traces of sulfuric acid, and critically low gravity less than 1 g.
Which explains why they were relatively effective in the high-gravity, sulfurous environment of Harris, even if it was colder than their native climate.
But the most profound insights came from studying their communication. Turusch appear to possess not one, but 2 brains.
2 brains? How does that even work?
Well, their language and thought process are explicitly hierarchical. They reference a mind here, a mind below, and a mind above. And when 2 Turusch speak, they often speak together in perfect, synchronized unison.
That synchronized, layered speech must point to incredible neural circuitry.
Xenosec experts believe they must possess the ability to communicate and think on multiple layers simultaneously, managing multiple streams of information and action. They can do this even when forced to communicate using lingua galactica, a common trade language they learned from the Eglecht.
So it suggests a consciousness far more synthesized and faster than the linear human mind.
It does. Yet despite this advanced neural complexity, the sources relate a tragic end for the captured Turusch. They died shortly afterward in a violent internal fight, possibly triggered by hunger or a lack of community.
Which raises the question of whether their complex multi-brain synchronization relies on specific, immediate social or environmental factors that the human holding facilities just couldn't provide.
They might be incredibly advanced, but also incredibly fragile when they're removed from their network.
And before they succumbed, they provided that critical insight into the core conflict, their profound, visceral fear of human progress.
Yes. They stated chillingly, you transcend into darkness, and when they pass beyond, they leave behind death.
And this fear directly relates to the human concept of the GRIN singularity.
GRIN. Genetics, robotics, infotechnology, and nanotechnology. The 4 drivers of humanity's exponential technological progress since the 20th century.
Okay, let's break down what GRIN actually means in the 25th century context. Genetics. We're talking about things like Admiral Norinaga with his implanted gills, allowing adaptation to new environments.
Right. Robotics includes the rapid deployment of complex machines, like teleoperation of non-terrestrial entities or NTEs, those specialized, highly adaptable robotic forms used for exploration or warfare.
Infotechnology ensures all information is constantly available via cranial implants and AIs, creating an effective collective consciousness among soldiers and leaders.
And nanotechnology allows rapid, almost instantaneous construction and repair, rebuilding systems or bodies in a matter of hours.
And crucially, these 4 technologies multiply each other's effects. Genetic enhancement combined with nanotech means a human can fundamentally change their body and mental capacity overnight.
And robotics combined with infotech means a single human can control dozens of military vehicles simultaneously, effectively becoming a distributed presence. This accelerates human change to an exponential, deeply unstable rate.
So the Turusch and the Sh'daar, they see this rapid, chaotic transcendence not as advancement, but as a dangerous transformation.
Exactly. It's the very technological drive that has stopped humans from becoming super-sentient god machines in previous centuries, not only because we kept getting distracted by wars and internal depressions, but the drive remains, and we are still moving toward that singularity.
And this leads to the fundamental strategic contradiction that Admiral Koenig was pondering. The Sh'daar have existed for 500 million years. If they are truly so advanced, godlike, as the sources describe them, why do they rely on comparatively fragile proxies like the Turusch and Sh'daar?
And why are they so profoundly concerned about human technological transcendence? Why don't they just, wipe us out?
Their strategy seems driven by this extreme, almost cosmic conservatism. The Turusch, even in battle, operated cautiously, often withdrawing when directly threatened.
They take the long view, a strategic imperative likely derived from the Sh'daar's half-billion-year history. They avoid hasty moves and conserve forces.
So they don't fear our current military strength, they fear what we are becoming.
I think so. They view our chaotic, rapid technological evolution, the Grin Drive, as the ultimate existential threat because it represents unpredictable change. A chaotic young species with the capacity to reshape its reality in hours might be more dangerous to the settled cosmic order than any stable, advanced empire. They fear the speed of our evolution.
And this ideological battle is waged by pilots who embody this Drin-fueled civilization, even as they resent it. We now turn to Lieutenant Gray and the painful human cost of this conflict.
Lieutenant Trevor Gray is the perfect encapsulation of the Confederation's societal fractures. He is a primitive squatter from the Manhattan ruins, the periphery. His background is a total contrast to the high-tech, highly monitored Navy he now serves.
He was born into a life completely outside the system, a ruin runner, subsisting in the massive, ruined arcologies of old Manhattan.
And the city was permanently submerged after rising sea levels, and Hurricane Cynthia caused a 12-meter surge, leaving skyscrapers as these steel and concrete cliffs above the water. Tribeca Tower, where Gray and his partner Angela lived, was a maze of ruins and squatter camps.
And for the Prims, the government or the authority, the peace forcers, they were the true enemy. They viewed them as seeing the Prims as mere pests or problems to be dealt with, not citizens.
They were constantly monitored, tracked by implants and surveillance tech. And above all, Gray feared reconditioning, or neural reconfiguration, the state's ultimate tool for compliance. He was fundamentally a technological skeptic, resenting the tiny AI demon implanted in his skull that monitored his activity.
His entry into the Navy wasn't ideological at all. It was a desperate, agonizing bargain.
His partner, Angela, suffered a serious stroke, and Gray knew he could never afford the high-level medtech needed to save her. So he agreed to forced induction into the Navy to secure her medical treatment.
And the sources highlight the painful fallout from that. He was left with this bitter conviction that the medical technicians adjusted or fundamentally changed Angela, severing their relationship.
The partner he married was gone, replaced by someone who was stabilized but perhaps emotionally neutered. He sacrificed his identity and his freedom for someone he ultimately lost anyway.
And the subsequent training was a brutal embodiment of the Dren philosophy, forcing conformity. He endured 6 months of download hell,
where vast amounts of astronautics, tactical analysis, and military history were directly uploaded into his nervous system. This was followed by a year of officer candidate school to become a grav-fighter pilot, Zorky.
So he went from barely being able to read and write to having deep strategic knowledge in just 6 months. It's an insane technological acceleration. The military literally reshaping his mind to meet the demands of relativistic warfare.
And even after becoming a pilot, the scrutiny never stopped. His fear of reconditioning was a major point in his constant psychological evaluations with Doctors Pfeiffer and George.
The military couldn't afford a wild card. They had to constantly monitor his emotional stability, desperate to ensure he was stable, competent, and reliable, not a hotshot or someone who would go off half-cocked.
He was an asset that needed to be managed because he embodied the very chaos they feared.
And the constant psychological pressure was compounded when his squadron suffered a devastating 50% casualty rate. Yet the source material traces this gradual, ironic psychological shift. It shows the Navy becoming, despite itself, a new kind of community for him.
It does. When Gray finally returns to the Manhattan ruins on leave, he finds his old world is utterly gone. His tribe is replaced by a new group, primarily Asians, and the old ways of life are over. His home is now irrevocably gone.
And this realization is the emotional turning point. Despite the Navy's constant surveillance, despite the elitist insults from other officers who called him prim or squatty, his life had become materially better, longer, and arguably more meaningful.
His former squadron mates, despite their arrogance, had become family.
And after the Turusch battle, having faced death together, Gray has that realization. It felt like home was now shipboard.
The Navy, the very institution that forced his transformation and shattered his old life, is now the only community that gives him purpose and connection. He has found his new identity inside the machine he once feared.
And this new identity is immediately tested by the horrific scale of the war. That earlier kinetic kill event on Mars, the single 12-kilogram projectile snapping the Ethiopian space elevator, that cemented in his mind as a symbol of the war's sheer destructive power.
And the sources add one more crucial detail. A near-sea impactor that struck Earth caused the Starstorm superhurricane.
This wasn't a minor weather event. This was a planet-spanning storm of such magnitude that it completely reconfigured coastlines and infrastructure. Gray has witnessed cosmic violence. He knows the sheer annihilation the Turusch are capable of deploying, and he knows they are now heading for Sol.
So the arc completes as Gray embraces his fate and his new home. He volunteers to lead a new, entirely green squadron of fighters and experienced pilots, just like he once was, to intercept the much larger Turusch invasion fleet, Force Bravo.
He's no longer Trevor Gray, the ruin runner fighting the Authority. He's Lieutenant Gray, the Zorchi fighting for the only family and home he has left among the stars. Hashtag outro.
So today we have undertaken a pretty complex synthesis of the strategic, technological, biological, and political elements of this war between the Terran Confederation and the Sh'daar Galactic Empire.
We really have. We saw how human conflict is now waged through warped spacetime and relativistic physics, where a handful of sand can vaporize an orbital base and shift the geology of a planet.
And we explored the bizarre alien life forms on Harris, like the shadow swarmers, that feed on carbon and dissolve carbon weave suits using sulfuric acid, making the very act of standing on the ground an act of vulnerability.
And we also explored the tragic human element, the political decay that led to micromanagement at the highest levels, and that tragic, deadly friction on the surface of Eris.
Where General Gorman had to use force to save a population that viewed the act of rescue as a submission to Shaitan.
Right. But I think what stands out most clearly, transcending the battle lines and the starbows, is the core philosophical battle.
I agree. The Turusch and the half-billion-year-old Sh'daar Galactic Empire view humanity's rapidly accelerating path through GRIN technologies, genetics, robotics, infotechnology, and nanotechnology, not as progress, but as a dangerous, chaotic transformation leading, in their words, to darkness and death.
The unpredictable and exponentially fast nature of human technological evolution is literally seen as an existential threat by the galaxy's oldest power.
And we've seen that the Turusch, despite their numerical superiority, operate with extreme caution, taking the long strategic view, a methodology undoubtedly derived from the ancient Sh'daar.
Given humanity's own chaotic, rapid, and politically fraught path to self-modification and technological transcendence, we'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider.
The Sh'daar are ancient, capable of godlike feats. They could eliminate humanity instantly, yet they use proxies and take the long, cautious view. This suggests a deep philosophical aversion to a specific outcome of the human path. So what specific aspect of the Drin singularity do you think the Sh'daar masters fear the most? Is this sheer unpredictable speed of our self-evolution, the fact that a human can change their mind, their body, and their fundamental reality in a matter of hours, rather than the millennia they are accustomed to?
Or is it the ultimate consequence of those technologies, the potential for a new, unstable, and violent form of supersentience that threatens the cosmic stability they have maintained for epochs?